Hey, what's happening out there? Robert Phoenix, broadcasting you live from South Central Texas, where slowly but surely we are thawing out and looking at a scorching 62 degrees tomorrow here in the, what is Austin? Music City? Is it Nashville, Music City? I think Austin might be, I don't know, Alt Music City. Anyway, it's getting warmer. Just found out last night that apparently Willie Nelson has moved out of Texas. How about that? Apparently Willie Nelson is now living in Hawaii. So aloha, Willie. Your spirit will live on forever, no matter where you live. And certainly it is embedded in lots of crooks and crannies and crevices all around the hill country, which is where you made a lot of your magic. All right, what's happening out there? Lots going on, obviously, in the world. Yesterday was kind of an epic. I usually don't do that very often. I got into like an epic sort of 90-minute kind of free associative rant. Generally speaking, 15 minutes of flames at the most, 45 minutes. And I know it's not 15 minutes, but it's okay. I guess one of these days I'm going to try. Maybe one day I'll do 1 week of true 15 minutes. We'll see how that goes. We'll see how much I can cram into 15 minutes for a week. That'll be a good exercise. A good Saturn and Capricorn exercise as we trim back the excess. We'll try that for 1 week. So yesterday was a pretty long show. And I went to a lot of detail about a lot of different things. And one of the things that I got into great detail about, of course, was this whole idea now that Trump has gone from being, he was a Russian plant, a Manchurian candidate. Of course, the CIA was really hoping that Moby would help promote that theme. And not sure that, even if he did, it really wouldn't have helped all that much. Because as Van Jones said, it's one big, giant, nothing burger. So we went from that, then we went to, he's unfit. He's mentally unfit. He's got all these mental issues, and I got into this whole idea of projection coming from the left, and gave some examples of what that looked like, how it manifested. And now, of course, that he's passed the test, the mental test, his evaluation, psych evaluation, now he's physically unhealthy. And Sanjay Gupta, who is able to, Sanjay Gupta apparently is some kind of mystical doctor. He's not just, he's like the magic Indian mystical doctor now on American TV, and he's predicting that Trump will have a heart attack. Now that's the whole game, that's the meme, that's the theme. And look, he's got Mars on the ascendant. He's a Leo. We've got this solar eclipse coming up, and that's going to be on the 15th of February, and that's going to be in almost the exact opposition as to where the solar eclipse was. Difference by about 4 degrees. Keep your eye on that, because that's going to be taking place in Trump's 6th house, which is his house of health. So just keep your eye on that. And it's not that difficult to induce a heart attack. It's that you can induce them through substances. You can induce them energetically. There are energy weapons that can absolutely take somebody out if they wanted to. So I suppose that if they wanted to bring a heart attack on Trump, I guess they could if certain safeguards weren't taken. So it's an interesting proposition, and one that actually could happen if they decided to turn on their black box technologies and take out the president. We'll see. Keep your eyes on that eclipse date about a week before and about a week after that eclipse date. Now that eclipse again is going to be taking place in Antarctica, which is an interesting place for an eclipse to take place. So if you want to go check out the eclipse, it's a partial eclipse. Get a 2-way ticket to Antarctica. Would you like to go to Antarctica? I would. I would totally love to go to Antarctica. Of course, it's kind of difficult. I think it's really kind of buttoned down and locked down. And if you want to have any kind of meaningful reconnaissance there, good luck. You might get to go on a tour boat and see some penguins and maybe touch ground or touch shore, and that may be about it. But any kind of extended journey over Antarctica, forget it. I was watching Turner Classic Movies the other night, and occasionally they have documentaries on the channel. So I saw that there was a documentary on Admiral Byrd and that whole Antarctic exploration, and I thought, well, I'm going to watch this. And I knew that there was not going to be any of the really arcane stuff where he's taken into Agartha. I mean, this was a documentary that was created by the United States Army. So it's not going to, or the Navy. I think it might have been the Navy. So that part's going to be left out. But what was interesting is seeing the scale and the scope of that actual exploration. I mean, it was a really big deal. They committed a lot of dollars, a lot of ships. They lost a lot of craft down there. I think they might have had at least 7 ships going to Antarctica with planes and helicopters, and there was a submarine in tow. So it was a really big deal during that time. It was a major, major, major exploration. So if you're interested in seeing kind of the company version of what that Antarctica journey looked like, look it up. It's probably on YouTube. There's probably a YouTube video or YouTube has a video of that documentary. So part of what we're going to be devoting our time to, not just today, but moving forward. This past week I've been talking about this whole concept of ruthlessness and stalking. And when you use those two words together, it brings up a lot of negative connotations. We think of stalking, we think of stalking people, gang stalking, targeting, triggering, all those things. And when we think of ruthlessness, we think of a psychopathic culture. But when we use both of those terms in terms of our own process, and we internalize them, that number one, the ruthlessness is the ruthlessness that comes from within us. And we have to be ruthless with ourselves and our motivations, which is a very, very difficult thing to do. Very, very difficult, but ultimately probably the only path towards some form of salvation, either secular or religious or otherwise. And then the stalking part that comes out of this tradition that Don Miguel Ruiz talks about, Carlos Castaneda talks about stalking this other, right? This part of ourselves that is into either some form of, self-sacrifice or destruction, self-destruction, leading us further and further away from the center of who we are. So there's a process that goes on. It's a very rigorous process where you're on the hunt for that. Now, once we get engaged with that, then there's that process that takes place on the outer. And so this was kind of the dialogue for most of this week. And so what we're going to need now is some tools in order to, if we want to affect a change, if we don't want the world that's coming, if we don't want 5G, if we don't want the AI army descending upon us, if we don't want to live in a mega city, we're really in a very short time frame and a short time scale. So we're going to need tools in the immediate, in the short term, and then mid to long term tools that are going to help us and empower us to really get into a world that we want, which is going to be, to some degree, different than the world that we're in, and certainly a lot different than the world that we're headed to, at least in my estimation. So what I'm going to be doing over the course of this year, and we're going to start a little bit today, is we're going to talk about solutions. Like, what can you do? How can you affect change in your own life and in the lives of other people? What are those tools that are there, that are available for us? How can we tap into them? And how do we make them user-friendly? So today, one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to bring on Christine Hassell, who has an incredible knowledge about Bitcoin and cryptos, and we're going to try to demystify the whole crypto world a little bit today. And in the short amount of time that I've known Christine, I've learned a lot about the cryptos, the cryptocurrency, and it's not just Bitcoin, it's not just Ethereum, and there are blockchain solutions for a lot of today's issues and problems that we're staring down. And I hope to have Christine on as a semi-regular guest to give us blockchain updates and tips. And I think some of you out there who are very enthusiastic about the blockchain will want to hear what she has to say. Some of the information might correlate and cross over to what you already know, but you might learn something new, and I certainly have. Well, a couple of things that I wanted to just talk about before we get into this whole thing with the blockchain and what it's about and some of the interesting components to it, I just ran across this story. This is a story that we want to keep an eye on here. And this comes off of Soren Dreyer, who has a pretty good website. That's one of those websites that you should probably bookmark. If you're into this material and some of the stuff that I talk about, he tends to also get into the spiritual side of this awakening process, which is very important. So there's a story on Soren Dreyer. And a lot of times he'll connect with other websites, and I think Murray Hill. The post that he has on my website. By the way, Murray has cooked up another post on Capricorn. They'll be putting up sometime next week. So if you enjoyed his first piece on Capricorn, I think you'll enjoy the second piece as well. And I think Soren Dreyer might have picked up on his first piece. Not sure. But anyway, there's a story that I just ran across today. And this comes from Newsweek, of all places. So here is Soren Dreyer kind of repurposing a story. And it's a 12-year-old with epilepsy sues Jeff Sessions over pot. So keep your eye on this. I'm just going to read this really quickly. It says a 12-year-old suing the federal government may have a whiff of adorableness, but for Alexis Bortle, who filed a lawsuit against Attorney General Jeff Sessions last fall, it's a choice she had to make to save her life. Bortle has epilepsy, and Sessions has made it his mission to make it impossible for her to access the only drug that has kept her seizures at bay, cannabis. A scream of terror. This is the header for the next paragraph. Bortle doesn't remember her first seizure, but her father does. Dean Bortle does. We were literally folding clothes, and Alexis was sleeping on the couch, he told Newsweek. All of a sudden, I heard her make this shriek. I mean, it was a scream of terror. I look over, and Alexis is stiff as a board, on her back, spasming. After several months in the dark, at first, Dean suspected his daughter had a brain-eating amoeba on account of headlines about them that summer. Alexis was diagnosed with epilepsy in 2013. I wonder if she had the PPV shot. Just a curiosity question. 3 years ago, Alexis began taking medical marijuana, and her seizures disappeared. But that treatment option is threatened by an aggressive federal crackdown on medicinal cannabis led by Sessions, who is also acting director of the DEA. Her day in court, circled this day, February 14th, at a New York City federal courthouse, is fast approaching. Alexis won't be there in person. She should be. That's my sense. But her lawyer, Michael Hiller, thinks the ruling will go their way. Well, that's good. We are very optimistic that the case is going to come out the way it should, which is that Controlled Substances Act is going to be found unconstitutional. Hiller said several other plaintiffs, a former professional football player, a veteran, and another child, are also included. Out of options. The basic outline of Alexis' story has been well reported. Horrible seizures forced her family to move from Colorado to Colorado from Texas, where she could use products with compounds derived from marijuana. Best due to the concentration of THC, also known as tetrahydrocannabinol, in one of the products she uses. Alexis is unable to cross state lines, board an airplane, or set foot on a military base, or in other federal buildings and lands. Biologically, Alexis' problems began in the left frontal lobe of her brain. Normally, brain cells communicate with each other using electrical and chemical signals. Epileptic seizures happen when those signals go haywire. Anyone familiar with epilepsy knows that a fairly muted description these rogue cells can create something terrifying to experience or watch. And you can't know when the next seizure will strike. It can be frustratingly random, Dean said. These brain signals can also spark a long-term relationship with one's neurological or hospital as patients and doctors figure out what is happening. But that's only half the battle. Controlling the seizures is the other. For many people with epilepsy, one of the various kinds of prescription drugs available will work. But finding the right one or the right combination can take time. They try to go mild to wild, Dean said. At home in Texas, none of the mild stuff worked for Alexis. Giving two medications a real shot and having them both fail is usually enough for doctors to call a person's epilepsy intractable. In other words, unresponsive to drugs. Alexis tried 20 different doses of combinations. Her father said she also experienced some extreme side effects from conventional medications. She had two final options in Texas. See if she was a candidate for surgery to remove the brain tissue where the seizures began, or try one last medication. Felbitol, The drug carries a black box warning, the most serious kind the U.S. Food and Drug Administration will put on a label to flag extremely dangerous side effects. In this case, Felbutol has been associated with a serious bone marrow disorder and liver failure. Pick your poison. The family decided on Felbutol, but on the way to fill the prescription, the pediatrician called them and suggested they try something else. Weeks later, after the Bortles packed their bags and drove to Colorado, ready to try a different course of treatment, a tincture of cannabidiol, a compound found in marijuana that isn't responsible for a high, and a spray with THC, the compound that is. The cannabidiol tincture tastes bad and earthy, Alexis told a Newsweek reporter, but it's been working. She still gets auras, the warning signs that a seizure is about to hit. But she hasn't had a full-blown episode in the last 3 years. Her father says the only side effect is the constant threat of law enforcement. Now this goes on. There's more to read. But you get the basic idea. This is going to be a very interesting case that comes up on February 14th under the sign of Aquarius in New York City, where a 12-year-old is taking on Jeff Sessions and the United States government. And I wonder, this is a really interesting component to this whole thing. Barron Trump is very mysterious. We never hear him speak. Never. Never, ever. And it's not a prerequisite. Like the president's son doesn't have to speak. In some ways, the privacy around it is refreshing, and he's not being paraded out and becomes this kind of sentimental centerpiece of Trump's stay in Washington. Unlike other presidencies where the kids have been. You know, those kids and those kid photo ops, they theoretically humanize the president, right? Oh, he's a family guy. He cares about his kids. We can trust him. And this is really not the case with Trump because he's just out of the picture. But what is really going on with Barron Trump? There's a large contingency on the internet that believe that he has some form of Asperger's. And it would be interesting to see if that is the case, that medicinal marijuana might actually be something that could benefit Barron Trump, who's right around the same age as this girl. Just kind of an interesting side note. And it's also fascinating because, you know, Jeff Sessions is so Capricornian. He's got New Moon in Capricorn in his chart, and Sun in Capricorn, and Mars in Capricorn. I mean, this is a Capricornian dude. He's got Black Moon Lilith in Capricorn, Mercury in Capricorn. Don't mess with Jeff Sessions. This guy's hardcore. I think he's got Mercury, I'm pretty sure. So and he's like so Saturnian. And here he has this 12-year-old girl going up against him. And it's not just the girl, but it's her family. Right? It's her family. And this is the Cancerian factor. Because, you know, when we get into Cancer, we talk about children, we talk about homes, we talk about emotional content and nurturing and all those things that are associated with the sign of Cancer. So literally this is Capricorn versus Cancer squaring off on February 14th at a courthouse in New York City. It should be very interesting to watch. And I hope that there is a very positive outcome for Alexis Bortle. Let's all keep our fingers crossed and say a little prayer for this girl and other people like her. Come on, it's time to move out of the Stone Age with this stuff. And I know that these plutocrats, they've got their investment in things like synthetic THC, which is just bullshit. You remember when Mitt Romney was running for president, and there was that viral video of that poor vet that was in a wheelchair. The guy was a mess, total mess. And he was just asking Mitt Romney what his position was on medical marijuana. And Romney is completely out of touch. Said, oh, I'm a backer of synthetic THC. Of course you are, because you've got investments in synthetic THC. Of course you are. And this guy was kind of, you know, in a very compassionate and you know, he wanted to debate Romney, and there was that meet and greet. It was not a place where you can get more than, you know, 2 or 3 sentences in, but he really wanted to like confront him a little bit on this stuff. And then Romney just like tossed him aside and moved on and kept smiling, went to the next hand. And that's all you need to know. That's all you need to know about the corporate and the so-called governmental relationship for the most part, because these guys are tied into the drug companies who want to cash in on synthetic THC. It's not just the fact that they think it's going to turn the country to pot and it's going to infect the youth of today and send them into a reefer madness state where they wind up killing people and all the stuff that goes along with it. So let's hope that this turns out in a way for the better. And I'm sure that if they get a good ruling, I'll bet you that the federal government will come into the next level, at the next rung up the ladder. And this could be something that could go all the way to the Supreme Court. Could go all the way to the Supreme Court. And that's what it might take in order for medical marijuana to basically be hands-off from the federal government across state lines. Let's hope so. All right, another story that crossed my path, and I've been following what's been going on in North Korea. It's very fascinating to watch what's going on with North and South Korea. Now, there are reports that there are a lot of things going on. Like, for instance, there are some people saying, well, this thing that North Korea is doing is just a Trojan horse. Meanwhile, they're amassing troops and they're doing all these things in order to prepare for war while they're looking like they're actually extending their hand to South Korea for peace. And then, of course, there are reports that China and Russia, but primarily China, are not honoring the quote-unquote blockade and the sanctions. China's buying coal from North Korea. There's oil that's being exchanged. So the Chinese have this whole sort of backdoor deal going on with North Korea while these quote-unquote sanctions are in place, which I think are utter bullshit. If we really wanted to, look, if you really wanted to help North Korea, get on their side, man. Get on their side. Say, hey, look, you've got some issues here, some problems here. We want to help you. We want to help you become an economic power. We did that with South Korea. We want to do this for you too. Let's build a relationship and let's invest in your people and let's find out how we can work together. Wouldn't that be an interesting option? But what they want to do is they want to sell us. They want to sell us on the fact that Kim Jong-un is a psychopath and so on and so on and so on. You can't have relations with a psychopath. You have to go preemptive on them and eliminate them. That's what a lot of people believe. So now here they are. They're doing this end around with the United States and the people who really, really want to flip North Korea and Iran and Syria and Venezuela and Cuba and putting a dent in their plans. So this is just a brief little story here. Stephen Lenman. This is from today, actually. Washington has been hostile to North Korea since the peninsula was divided post-World War II. U.S. policymakers since the Truman administration rejected improved relations. Things today are especially tense. Trump and other administration hardliners prefer bullying, pressure, and brinksmanship to responsible dialogue to ease tensions and work toward resolving contentious issues. Trump and other administration hardliners, inter-Korean ministerial and working level talks showed both countries favor stepping back from the brink. Of course, it's not just North Korea who could really suffer in a war. It's not like North Korea is 3,000 miles away from South Korea. It's not. I mean, if there's a war, South Korea is going to take on some form of collateral damage. So Moon is concerned for his people. He's totally concerned. I don't blame him. You're responsible for these lives, unless, of course, you're just another dyed-in-the-wool sock puppet who does funny handshakes with other people when the cameras are on and off. So that's a whole different subject, but let's just assume for now that he's actually thinking about the people that live in his country, okay? Both Koreas will march together in the opening ceremony under a unified Korean Peninsula flag. How about that? That is symbolic. They'll field a joint women's hockey team. They may also field a joint two-man bobsleigh team. Cheerleaders from both nations will cheer for their athletes together. Pyongyang agreed to send a Taekwondo demonstration team. It'll send the press corps to cover the games. Both Koreas will hold joint cultural events at Mount Kumgang in North Korea before the opening ceremony of the games. Skiers from both countries will participate in joint training exercises at the DPRK's Masik Pass ski facility. 150 member North Korean delegation is coming to the 2018 Paralympic Games in March, following the Winter Olympic Games, including athletes, cheerleaders, art performers, and reporters. On January 20th, that's the first day of Aquarius, by the way, an International Olympic Committee meeting attended by representatives of both Koreas. Names of DPRK athletes and officials attending games will be announced. Instead of welcoming improved inter-Korean relations, the Trump administration rejects them. In an earlier statement calling talks between both countries an attempt to drive a wedge between Washington and Seoul. Trump rejects diplomacy with Pyongyang, calling it a waste of time. His latest remarks saying, "I'm not sure that sitting down will solve the problem." Adding, we're playing a very, very hard game of poker. You don't want to reveal your hand. So is Trump really going to go out of his way and do a first strike and nuke North Korea? Or is this another one of these things that Trump does in order to continue to create some form of front? Is Trump fronting in North Korea? Well, on the backside, there's actually these talks going on. Because, look, if Trump really is committed to, quote-unquote, making America great again, theoretically, right? And he has to deal with essentially a government within a government inside of Washington, D.C. And not only that, but foreign interests that are banking cartel interests, and we know where they're located. Those interests are located in places like Zurich, London, and of course Tel Aviv. Right? These are where the major crime syndicates are, the banking families are. Frankfurt is another one of the big countries. So these are the forces that Trump has to deal with. And these are the forces that want to flip North Korea, flip Iran, flip Syria, flip Venezuela, flip Cuba, so that everybody can go hand in hand into the new world order with a one world economy, and there's no dissent. There's nobody outside of the World Bank or the IMF. These are the people that are demanding, literally, that it happen. So is Trump fronting in order for these talks to go on so there can be some kind of a delay? That's a question mark. And you may say, well, no, he's just a typical Zio whore, and that may be the case too. With Trump and that Sun-Uranus conjunction in Gemini, Pluto in Gemini, it's very hard to just really discern what's going on here. The latest being, of course, with moving the embassy to Jerusalem. He's like, push it out a year now. Yeah, it'll happen in a year. What's going to happen a year out from there? And this is what presidents of the United States have been doing for a long time. They just keep kicking the can down. They just keep kicking it down. Yeah, next president. It doesn't really happen. But at that time, that created a big splash, that statement. And of course, it created a lot of dissension in places like the West Bank and Gaza and things like that. But it gave the illusion or the appearance that this was happening. Well, now we know that it's not happening for at least a year. And what we know now, a lot can happen in a year. So I'm just throwing this out there because perhaps he's fronting, and perhaps he's not. But what we do know is that the two countries are talking. Diplomacy is the only acceptable option. Nothing else can work. Days earlier, Pyongyang accused Washington of throwing cold water on an inter-Korean atmosphere of reconciliation. I hope they do. I hope they do. Let them work it out. Let them work it out. Check this out. Check this out. What if all of a sudden they decided to become one Korea? Holy shit! Think about that as an end around. Now, so here's where it gets interesting. South Korea is already in the World Bank and the IMF. So if they become one Korea by default, North Korea gets moved in. Okay? That would be interesting to the extent that, well, the problem solved. You can't just go after North Korea and nuke them now. You got what you wanted. You flipped them. You turned them kind of a soft regime change. But what if they have relations that are ongoing and peaceful and providential and trade agreements and all the things that they set up in order to establish a North and a South? What if they did that? That would be interesting, because they can still retain their independence from one another and yet have a bond, trade agreements and a diplomatic bond that assures them that they can work together and yet stay apart. Isn't this what they want? Interdependence? A state of interdependence? It's going to be interesting. Keep your eyes on the Olympics. Keep your eyes on false flags and psyops as usual during an event like that. And also keep your eyes on the opening ceremonies. It can actually be quite revealing. What else do we have here? Let's see. During a press conference in Vancouver, Rex Tillerson warned of a military option, disgracefully blaming North Korea for Washington's refusal to choose diplomacy over hostile rhetoric and confrontational policies. Tensions remain high on the peninsula because the Trump administration refuses to ease them. So did his predecessors. Washington demands all nations bend to its will. It's not Washington. Stephen, let's get this right. It's not Washington. Washington is the proxy for the global government. Washington is the proxy for the New World Order, which we are, by, for all intents and purposes, already a part of, if you haven't figured that out yet. Outliers wanting their sovereign independence respected are targeted for regime change. Naked aggression, America's favorite option. It's not America's favorite option. America is the pit bull. America is the attack dog. It is not America's favorite option. Let's get this clear, Stephen. It's not my favorite option. I'm an American. You're an American. Is that your favorite option? No. Is war in North Korea next? U.S. imperial madness makes anything possible. Anyway, Stephen Ledman, interesting writer, manages to put ideas together in a very condensed, salient, and journalistic fashion. One more story here, and this is going to launch us into our story about our dialogue about cryptos and Bitcoin and all these other things. There's a story out on PJ Media, and it's being repeated on a number of different news services. Now, I have not experienced this because I was at Whole Foods the other day, and the Whole Foods here in Austin, there are 3 of them, all within sort of shouting distance of where I live. The mothership of all the Whole Foods is in downtown Austin, and there are 2 that are almost equidistant to where I live, which I go to every now and then. Usually, my routine is I'll go to Costco and buy what I need at Costco, and then I get the topper, right? The topper at Whole Foods, which is right next door. However, there are Whole Foods across the country that are displaying barren shelves and produce that is going bad, or produce that is less than savory in terms of its taste and quality. Now, I'm not going to read you the whole story here. I'm just going to read you the first couple paragraphs. And this is from PJ Media. And thanks, Kimberly, for sending this along. Shoppers at Whole Foods markets across the U.S. have been astonished to discover empty shelves at their local stores in recent months, with one customer describing the stores as the Soviet Safeway. Barclay analysts found stores in disarray with entirely empty shelves and deteriorating produce, Business Insider reported. Analysts said they encountered high out-of-stock issues last week in every department of one Midwest store across both private label items and branded items, according to the report. One East Coast store had extraordinary inventory problems, according to the analyst. The store had no bananas, and the supply of eggs and Tropicana products was very low, the analyst reported. Entire displays, refrigerated cases, and end caps were completely empty. The prepared foods hot bar was entirely empty. This follows a December story that found dozens of shoppers reporting bruised, discolored, tasteless, and rotten produce in Whole Foods stores from California to New York over the past couple months. This person says, Susie Ippolito, I purchased apples that tasted like water and orange that was yellow and tough on the inside and a bruised lemon. Susie Ippolito said at the time about a store in Manhattan's Upper East Side. That was the last time I went to Whole Foods. If you can't sell me a decent apple in the height of apple season, I've lost all faith in your store. Many customers have taken to Twitter to complain about the problem. Whole Foods, empty bread shelf, makes it seem like people are prepping for the apocalypse. What is it with Whole Foods? 10-10? It looks like the Soviet Safeway. Empty shelves everywhere. New ownership is not impressing. Another one. Went to buy decaf beans at Square One, Mississauga. I guess what is that, Massachusetts? Medium dark, not available. Several others not available. Somebody is sleeping on the job. Came back empty-handed. Disappointing. Jeff Bezos at Amazon. Another one, conversation today at Whole Foods amongst the shoppers all agree this is Amazon takeover. Quality produce has plummeted, and now there are empty shelves. A great opening for competitor nationwide, maybe at Sprouts. Now, here's what the common thought is around this, is that Bezos, if you look at Amazon and Amazon Market, what they do is they pit sellers against one another. And this is kind of it's not just an Amazon Market. This is an Amazon policy, and they do it with their employees. They pit one against each other. There are people who actually like that. They like the kind of hostile, open competition that's at Amazon. And if you're a free market trader into Ayn Rand and stuff like that, you might be into it too. Survival of the fittest. The strong survive. And there are people who thrive in environments like that. And I'm not saying that necessarily Amazon has to change their internal model. You want to work there. You want to get in. You want to grow. You want to, burn for 3 or 4 years, get your stock options and then get out and move on. That's entirely up to you. If they want to have crappy environment inside their warehouses and work your dog tired and have poor shift changes and lousy bathrooms, you want to work there, that's up to you. The problem is that when that's the only option, that's where the problem is. So what they do in terms of their workplace, pitting people against each other, which is common, you can look this up online, they pit sellers against one another on their Amazon Market. And what they're always trying to do is they're always trying to get these extremely low prices so that Amazon becomes the go-to for just about everything. And there are sellers who do not want to play that game. They believe that their products should be representative of a certain price point, and they get bullied by Amazon. So Amazon likes to control the marketplace, and they can do that. And guess what happens? If they continue to make things difficult for sellers on Amazon, then eventually the seller will leave, and that's one less part of the competition they have to worry about. So as long as Amazon has, let's say, a dozen different sellers or providers that they could continue to whip up this state of competition and frenzy and keep the prices down, they're fine. So they've done this, they're doing this now in terms of their relationship with vendors through Whole Foods. So what they're trying to do now is they're trying to get the prices down on their produce and all their other goods. And they're doing it because they're ordering less. They talk about spoilage, and they don't. They want to make sure that they're not sending a lot of stuff back. But what they're really doing is they're trying to force the hands of their providers to actually lower their price so they can bring more product in. So they're trying to strong arm the distributors and providers of their products. Now these providers, this is going to be an interesting battle about who blinks first. Now, Amazon has a ton of money. They have a ton of money. They can absorb some losses with Whole Foods. And of course, Amazon gets all kinds of kickbacks and all these goodies that the federal government gives them. They get all kinds of incentives. If Trump really wants to take a shot at Amazon, he should just look at all the incentives that they get and just begin to cut them out, just like he wants to do with Pakistan. I don't think that that's going to happen, because Amazon also has huge dollars in terms of lobbying to keep those incentives alive. So they can take a hit if they need to, but it's going to be interesting because this is a whole new landscape for Bezos and the mind trust, the brain trust at Amazon. And can the providers and the distributors continue to find outlets and a market for their products through other chains and other stores that will develop potentially in the wake of what's going to happen with Amazon? Another point here to bear watching is that Amazon wants to have delivery. They don't want to have physical spaces that you roam around in. Okay? They don't want that. They want everything to be on demand, delivered to your house, less square footage, less brick and mortar. But in order for them to get into the delivery business, they had to have a brick and mortar presence. So they also have been working on a new store, a new model of a store, which they may actually use to replace Whole Foods. They're much smaller. They're about 1,200, 1,500 square feet. They're 12 to 15,000 square feet, right? They're not that big. They're yeah, that's about right. 12 to 15,000 square feet. They're not like Whole Foods. And these stores are basically geared to allow you to walk out. You just walk. You go in, you shop, you walk out. You don't pay for anything physically. You just have your phone or your chip or whatever. So they're working on that model, and somewhere between that model and the brick and mortar model with Whole Foods, I think they're going to try to come up with a hybrid. So it's going to be very interesting to watch who's going to blink first and what the competition is going to do. Okay, so that brings us to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day is cryptocurrency and blockchain and all the things that are associated with cryptocurrency and blockchain. And I've been really fortunate to have a client and work with a client, and through a number of my relationships with my clients and people that I connect with, I find that they have all kinds of interesting skills and gifts and information that is, and I think this is indicative of a lot of people. There's an incredible amount of mind share out there that isn't being tapped into. We are the greatest resource that the planet has. Beyond oil, beyond anything, we're the greatest resource. And through Saturn and Capricorn, I hope we realize that and tap into it. So anyway, through my dialogues with Christine Hassell, I'm about to bring on, Christine has displayed an unusual perception and knowledge of cryptocurrencies and the blockchain. So I decided that I wanted to bring Christine on the show and actually talk about some of these things. And she doesn't have a blog or anything yet, but that could be in the offing. And hopefully what we'll do is get her on about 15 minutes a week and just 20 minutes a week and just talk about the newest sort of updates in the blockchain world. So all the way from Washington, state of Washington, I want to bring on Christine Hassell and just thank her for being on, and let's get into this whole blockchain. And thanks, Christine, for being on.
Hi, Robert. Thank you. It's really great to be here.
So why don't you give people some background and give them a sense as to when you got interested in the whole blockchain phenomenon, and what was kind of the light going off in your head when that happened?
Well, I got into it early in 2017, I would say probably around April. And I was really motivated and inspired by Cliff High. And because Cliff is into predictive linguistics, that's what really flipped the switch for me, because in my professional life, predictive linguistics are applicable, and it just really resonated with me in the fact that cryptos were something that Cliff was really optimistic about and felt really positive about. It seemed like it was worth learning and looking into it further. So.
Okay, so you're sort of following the tail of Cliff, who was in early on crypto world. So what was the first cryptocurrency that you invested in, and what was how did that all come about? What made you sort of pivot and really get more engaged from just a philosophical or theoretical perspective?
Well, I realized how powerful cryptos are financially for getting people out of the ghetto, so to speak, financially. The first one I invested in was, I think it was Z Classic when it was just coming on, and I bought into it. It appreciated rapidly. I sold it for some more Ethereum, and then I used that Ethereum to sort of level up into a series of other cryptos. And I'm really interested in cryptos that are not just currencies, but that have a variety or different use cases. Cryptos that have the potential to help us create a new economy that is a decentralized economy, that is empowering for the common man or woman who isn't part of the establishment. And I've got quite a bit of experience investing lots of money, losing lots of money in the legacy infrastructure, and with Cliff's guidance, and there's a lot of other folks on YouTube as well, like Mike B, and Big Swear and J Snip 4, I think those guys are referred to as the three amigos, Cliff and J Snip and Bix. And then Mike B's got a gig going on with Andreas of BTC Business Consult. These guys won't steer you wrong. If you want to learn more about cryptos and you have limited time and you want trustworthy, good-hearted, generous people, I highly recommend you tune into these guys and just roll up your sleeves and dig in. I think cryptos are going to help us escape things like the ghettoization of food and the centralization of food production and distribution. I think things like FoodCoin, for example, which is its own blockchain. It's in development right now, but it's going to provide the exit for us so that we can leverage sites like 1,000 Eco Farms, which people may not know about, but that's an online collection of small businesses and small farms and individuals who, through 1,000 Eco Farms, for example, you can get access to artisanal products. Things we go to Whole Foods and we want to buy the specialty cheeses and the rare things that you can't get at the normal, food places. So you can get artisanal honey and you can get mushrooms and teas and cosmetics through 1,000 Eco Farms, and you can know your farmer. You can, reach out and talk directly to the people who are producing the food, and you can dialogue with them, and you can leave feedback. You can basically. I think it's a responsibility that we all have to cultivate the cultivators of the food, if you will. So I encourage everybody to check out 1,000 Eco Farms. I like them because they're in DC, but they're also based in the Russian Federation, and I'm pretty sure that Vladimir Putin doesn't like GMO food. And so when I think about these Russian guys out there, and I think they're actually in Eastern Europe doing the coding, I feel a lot more optimistic about the potential to have access to healthy organic food where we can actually track where it comes from with the blockchain currency that FoodCoin is going to be providing for us.
So just to kind of clear things up, a lot of people think that cryptocurrency is, things like Bitcoin and Ethereum and Litecoin and the Monero and all these things that are actually exchanges for digital currency via the blockchain. But the blockchain is more than that, isn't it? Can you talk about the blockchain as it relates to the crypto and the blockchain as it relates to kind of a decentralized system?
Well, the blockchain is just one type of technology that allows us to disintermediate and to decentralize. There are other ways to do that with this brave new crypto world, like Hashgraph and IOTA, and these are different kinds of crypto technologies. So blockchain technology is the king with Bitcoin as a currency, but there are many different kinds of use cases for these technologies. So we've got currencies, we've got peer-to-peer capital market exchanging, we've got entertainment, like with Funfair token, we've got food with FoodCoin. What else? Oh, we've got a really amazing technology is Populous, which is, in my hope and opinion, going to help keep the middle class alive globally, because what it does is invoice factoring. So for small to medium enterprises, like if you're a small business and you have to wait 60 to 90 days for an invoice to come in, normally you would go to a bank and you would ask the bank to factor your invoice to basically purchase your invoice, and you'd have to give a deep discount to the bank. And the bank then turns around and pays out their bonuses and spends all their money on their yachts and their overhead. But with Populous, it's artificial intelligence algorithms that are factoring the invoice. So you don't need these third parties. You don't need all this overhead. So you can factor your invoice at a fraction of the cost, and you can get access. Whereas a bank isn't. Like, I have a small business, and a bank would not a bank, I wouldn't qualify to get one of my invoices factored at a bank, even though my invoice could run 8, 10, 12 grand. So, but if I use the Populous platform, I can find somebody who is a Populous token holder who essentially is providing a liquidity pool of currency for me to go ahead and get paid upfront on that invoice at much less of a discount than I would have to give a bank, and I get access.
Well, that's totally interesting. It gives us an idea as to the wide array of what's happening in the blockchain world. And we're headed into Uranus and Taurus, where the money is going to change, money systems are going to change, hard assets are going to change, and Uranus is technological. Now, I'm not anti-blockchain, I'm not anti-cryptocurrency, and I also have not been kind of the Paul Revere of cryptocurrencies as well. And I think I'm kind of indicative of a certain group of people who are certainly interested and are, want to keep our connection to tools that help us become independent or interdependent and try to take out some of the old line institutional forces that have controlled marketplaces. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. And in fact, it can be really exciting and level the playing field and maybe could spur new jobs and even a new economy. We're headed into this kind of outer limits place now. The event horizon is upon us. But the other thing that we have to kind of wrap our heads around, at least from a certain perspective, is that many of us have been entrained into this idea that there is a physical act, and out of that physical act there is energy. Out of that energy, something is created. Something out of that physical act or energy is created. It can be a physical product, or it can be an exchange of services between two people, which I think is as legitimate as a product. And so from that process, we have this currency of exchange, which is physical. It's money. It allows us to some degree to have anonymity. We don't have to have our transactions tracked. And it is the coin of the realm. So we all agree upon it. And in fact, the entire world has pretty much agreed upon the dollar as being the de facto currency, or the petrocurrency. That is now under threat. The Chinese are making huge strides to take on the dollar with their petro-yuan, and Russia is kind of joining in. We have the BRICS countries. So as the dollar, is in this kind of international crisis, we now have the rise of the cryptocurrency. I think the two things that are, in some ways, have people kind of on the fence is, number one, they may not be able to make this leap that out of this kind of digital world where nothing theoretically exists, that some value comes out of it and can be transacted and then turned into something that's physical. I think that's a big leap for people. And the other leap is the fact that, and this is more of a kind of a philosophical leap, that is a paradigm shift between physical and non-physical assets and monetization. But the philosophical leap, and this is the one that I've heard used, and I actually have kicked this around for a while, is that the digital currency, which may or may not be blockchain or Bitcoin, is going to be the currency in the economy of the beast, right? So we're connected up to these digital transactions. They're all tracked. And then we either use as an intermediary the iPhone 10, or we have the national ID card, and then ultimately the chip. And I think somewhere in the head or in the mind of people who are trying to wake up and want to get out of that, hyper-centralized kind of experience, there's a bit of a fear factor that in some ways we're feeding the beast. So first, I would love to hear your thoughts on going from this kind of physical to digital, and this idea that we have output, and through the output we have a physical product, and through that physical product we have physical money exchange, and then the kind of the more philosophical sort of fear, the existential fear surrounding like Bitcoin, not the blockchain per se, but Bitcoin and digital currencies.
Well, I see the U.S. dollar as, the digital U.S. dollar is about as beastie as you can get, and if I want to transact, I got to put my card in the little slot, and it has to read the chip. And so we're pretty much there already. I see the cryptos as a way out of that. I got a surprise bill for $8,000 last month, and I really didn't have that much liquid, but I was able to go ahead and sell some of my crypto and transfer it from my Coinbase account into my bank account, and transfer it from my bank account to my contractor. And if it weren't for the cryptos, it would have been a much more painful experience and much less successful experience.
And what about this idea that that we live in a physical economy, physical world, and there's this kind of algorithm of time, energy exchange, transformation of matter, and then some kind of transactional experience on the other end of that?
Well, can you be more specific?
Yes. Okay. So let's say, for instance, I have a friend who has a ton of money in Bitcoin, and for them it's just like this ocean of money, free money. They didn't really do anything. They just got there at a certain point in time. They don't do any mining, which I suppose would be the equivalent of like putting in a hard day's work, right, with the mining. But they didn't do any of that, so they're just kind of in this place where there's this thing that's out there. They got in. There's some perceived value around that thing because there's less of that thing as time goes on, which I believe is like the theorem of the blockchain. And then there's an extraction of that value. But the only thing that took place in that kind of moment in time was one's attention, one's kind of focus around that system and being invested in it. But is there any what's created out of it? And I know the blockchain stuff is different. Like when you're talking about the grocers and the relationship to the blockchain, that's a different model. I'm specifically talking about investing in a cryptocurrency where there's really nothing taking place except the market share, the market value, and that's about it. I mean, even with a stock, right? Let's say you invest in a stock.
Well, they're creating code. I mean, you're investing in a group of individuals with a vision who are creating the code to make the vision happen. When you invest in a stock, you're doing the same thing, right?
Well, that's where I was going with it. The difference with a stock is if I invest in a stock, and I don't know, maybe Lyft or Uber wouldn't be the best examples. But if I invest in a stock, I'm investing in a company that creates a product. Right, that they have an idea, they have a design, they have manufacturing, they have distribution, and this is a model that a lot of people can wrap their heads around.
Well, I think we need to start wrapping our heads around the fact that we are going to have the opportunity to disintermediate and to decentralize, and from my perspective, those are very valuable products.
So the idea here is for people to kind of make this leap. It is kind of a paradigm leap in their consciousness and how we've been doing business. And you've actually been able to make that leap pretty successfully and gracefully. And I guess what I'd love to hear from you is, how did you do that, and how can you not assure people, but give people some insight that this brave new world actually has value, merit, meaning, and can be an extension of an economy and a system of production that we've been engaged in since the Industrial Revolution?
Well, I might wax a little esoteric on you, so I hope you're okay with that. But I think the first thing we have to do is suspend disbelief in our prosperity. I think the context that we live in chips away at it in form and density pretty intensively, but we really have to conceive of thriving in a time when all evidence may portend to the contrary. We have to suspend disbelief in our potential to thrive in this world. And if we can grasp that we are our own creator gods, and if we do focus our intention and our passion and our behavior, so it's thoughts and feelings and behaviors. Thoughts create feelings, create behaviors, reciprocally so. So if we can get in alignment with the desired outcome, and we can find a tool to help us achieve that outcome, and we move forward with it, I don't think we can lose. I really have a lot of faith in Cliff High. I know that his Alta work, what does he get? Maybe a greater than 50% chance on a lot of his hits, which is still phenomenal. greater than 50%, but when you transfer his work over to the crypto realm, the level of accuracy is uncanny. And so I have used Cliff's work. And Cliff, if you ever hear this, I just want to give you a shout out, Grandfather Cliff. Much love, many thanks for being a guide to all of us. You are a wicked pirate, so congratulations. Cliff's work, you can get it for $99. The Bare Naked Wealth Report, it's a guidepost. Start there. Am I answering your question? I'm sort of rambling, but am I on the right track here? So, and I mentioned some of the other YouTubers who I've also put my faith in, and it's panned out. I think that there's a lot of shit coins out there, so you got to really be careful for sure. There's a lot of stuff that isn't going to be useful, but we're in the process of infrastructure being laid for a brave new world and a brave new economy. And I really want to encourage everybody that the opportunity is there for you. And if you set the intention and you energize it with your passion, your emotion, and you focus clearly on what you want, not what you don't want. It's not a reactive process. It's not a defensive process. It's moving towards something. It's manifesting something out of nothing, and I think in that way the cryptos are an awesome metaphor for that process.
All right. Well, thank you, Christine. We're gonna have Christine on more in the future, and probably on a frequent basis. So she can actually talk about things like ICOs, and there's a whole world of cryptocurrency that's out there. That's not just sort of Bitcoin related or Litecoin related. It's a fascinating universe that's evolving. And when I was downtown in Austin probably about a month and a half ago, just before Christmas, I was at an incubator, and I was talking to some guys who were thinking about marketing my astrology course. And I asked one of the guys, they're both young guys, so what's going on? What's happening in the investment world? What's happening in the IPO world? All that stuff. And they said that the big money is in basically three areas: virtual reality, augmented reality, and blockchain. So this is coming in our direction, and I think there's going to be some opportunities where you can really tap in and see what's there. I mean. My thing around Bitcoin and the cryptos, and again, I'm not nearly as savvy and as informed as Christine, but I've always seen this as a hedge, that it's good to have a hedge, whether it's silver or gold or whatever it is. And the cryptos can at the very least be a form of a hedge that you can get invested in and involved in. Do you want to sink your entire fortune in a cryptocurrency? Well, I'm not so certain. That's up to you, and you need to be informed about it. But certainly, I think it could be a very powerful and supportive hedge and supplement to whatever it is that we're going through. And if the dollar is really at a point where it's completely maxed out, and the fiat lending and the debt is at a point where they just can't recirculate it anymore, they can't keep renewing their contract with debt year after year after year, something new is going to have to come into play. And maybe that something new will be systems that are in competition with one another. Maybe there'll be kind of an above ground version of a digital currency and a below or an underground version of digital currency. And that'll be really interesting. That could be one of those things where if you want to get off the grid and you don't want to have you don't want to be chipped, or you don't want to play that game, maybe there's a rival version that is traded amongst people in maybe the dark web or some other version of the internet that is based on nodes. And so this is a very interesting time. And one of the things that I think we have to be really aware of are some of the options that are out there for us, because if we're going to create something different, create something new, and disentangle ourselves from the beast, we need to know what all of our options are. So this is going to be kind of an ongoing exploration with cryptocurrencies, and there's going to be more. Later today, I'm going to be talking with Shauna Holm, who is from Washington State. I've had Shauna on in the past, and she's an exceptional resource for plants and entheogens and plant medicine and bees and all kinds of really important stuff. And she's very hands-on and very practical. So Shauna is going to be a part of the show, hopefully once a month, and give us some updates in that world. So we're going to continue to kind of build this out in 2018 as we evolve through Saturn and Capricorn. The show will evolve through Saturn and Capricorn as well. And what we want is we want practical solutions. We want things that can empower us. We want things where we can create our own paradigm. Think about that. Think about that. I mean, back in 1776, there were a group of men that decided we're going to create our own paradigm. Now, of course, you get into that, and there's all kinds of interesting side deals. And I mean, we can go down the rabbit hole. We can go down the rabbit hole. We can look at, the false flag of the Boston Tea Party and all those characters, who were. They basically, and by the way, a lot of people during the time of the American Revolution did not want to part from England. They were quite happy with the relationship. But there was a paradigm shift that took place, and it happened. And, we are in the midst of another paradigm shift. And that paradigm shift is going to happen with technology, whether you like it or not. It is coming, okay? It is coming. So we have to have our own relationship with technology so we can participate in the paradigm shift, and maybe perhaps more on our terms than the terms that are dictated to us by the people that are running the multinational corporations who are in connection and alignment with the governments of the world in order to create a new model for us to participate in. And one that has, on the one hand, a lot of leisure and embedded in it, but also takes away perhaps a lot of the personal initiative and personal component to living on this planet, where we can carve out a niche for ourselves, which some people still want to do and don't necessarily want to give up their individual rights and freedoms and their ability to live in the world the way that they want. So this is going to be an interesting time for that, and we are definitely in a paradigm shift, and let's see if we can find some technologies and some tools that are going to help us and assist us as we move forward. And one of the things that I do is I bring this stuff up, we talk about it, I bring it out. You can take this information and you could bring it home, and if it inspires you, then you can work with other people. Right? This is where we've got to go now. And I do my best to bring people on to share, disseminate ideas and my own ideas and what's out there in the thought stream. And, and I'll do my best in my own life to, sort of anchor this change. But you can do it yourself. You can do it yourself. It is not impossible. And it all starts as something between 2 people, 3 people. And the next thing you know, you've got a collective or whatever it is you put together. And it can be a very, very empowering act between people that are wanting to wake up or want to peel away from these prescribed solutions of the future that we think we have to inherit. Okay? All right. So I did a really long show yesterday. I did an overly long kind of 15 minutes of flame. So today I'm going to actually be a little more economic on the Friday FARcast. We're going to come in. It's going to be quick hits today and a couple of stories, an introduction, an initiation into the realm of the cryptocurrencies and the blockchain, and something to just kind of get you to think about and ponder and wrap your head around. Do your own research. Do your own research. See what's out there. It's not just Bitcoin, not just Ethereum. There's a lot happening. There's a universe of digital currency and blockchain technology and relationships that are exploding right before our very eyes. All right, why don't we leave it there? And let's send you off early on a Friday today. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. I'll be back Sunday night with the live stream, and we'll get into some really cool stuff on the live stream this Sunday night. I've got a few ideas that we can play around with. I just have to figure out the chart thing with YouTube and their new technology, which does not allow me to post graphics. Got to wrap my head around that one a little bit. So join me Sunday night on the live stream, and of course over on robertphoenix.com and over on Facebook, and I think that's about it. All right, you know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to set what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Thank you, Christine Hassell, for being a part of the show today. And